Okay, guys, good morning. Welcome back to our ABA book club, Reading Between the Wines. So we are currently on page, oh my gosh, what page is it?
383.
Oh, 383. Okay, I see it. 383. We're going to go into conditioned motivating operations. Last week we were talking about unconditioned motivating operations, and we had a lot of fun giving examples on those. So now we're going to go into conditioned motivating operations. So those are going to be learned, right? So you have previously come in contact with some type of stimuli, or some type of SD, or something has happened that you have been conditioned to respond in a certain way. And so that is going to be where those come from. So motivating variables that alter the reinforcing effectiveness of other stimuli, objects, or events as a result of the organism's learning history are called conditioned motivating operations. As with UMOs, CMOs alter the momentary frequency of all behavior that has been reinforced by those other events. In common terms, some environmental variables as a product of our experiences make us want something different from what we wanted prior to encountering those variables, and encourage us to try to obtain what we now want. For example, needing to enter a room with a locked door establishes the key to the lock as an effective reinforcer. A locked door is a CMO because its value altering effect is a function of learning history involving doors, locks, and keys. Okay, so now we're going to go into the CMO-S, CMO-R, and then CMO-T. I know some people really get these mixed up, so we'll try our best to give good examples and so that we can all understand them. So a surrogate condition motivating operation produces the same effect as another MO because of some type of pairing. So a surrogate is a substitute or a stand-in. So if we're taking notes, we would say surrogate is a substitute or a stand-in. And then a reflexive CMO alters the relation to itself and makes its own removal effective as reinforcement. So for reflexive, I always think of run away, like I pair the R with run. And so that is your kind of like escape type of reinforcer. Okay, and then you have transitive CMO. So make something else effective as reinforcement rather than altering itself. So for CMO-T, I always think of tool. So the tool is going to change, or the tool becomes the motivation. You need the key to open the door. So that's your CMO-T. That's the tool that you need in order to open the door. But maybe a key wouldn't be valuable if the door was already unlocked. So stuff like that. So that's just a little summary of those three. So let's go into the surrogate. So it was a previously neutral stimulus that acquired its MO effects by being paired with a UMO. This process is similar to how respondent conditioned stimuli, operant conditioned reinforcers, and operant conditioned punishers acquire their functions by being paired with another behaviorally effective stimulus. So let's look at this example, and then we'll try to think of our own examples. So for example, a restaurant may exert discriminative control over several behaviors, including ordering food, since restaurants have been differentially correlated with the availability of food. However, because we typically go to restaurants after a period in which we have not had any food, so we're really hungry, so food deprivation as a UMO, it is possible that after multiple pairings with food deprivation, the restaurant would function as a CMO-S, establishing food as a reinforcer and evoking behaviors that have produced food, ordering some. Exemplifies the establishment of the restaurant as your CMO-S. So that's the surrogate. The restaurant is the one that it's like your middleman, right? Like, I'm super hungry, and so I need this restaurant because it supplies me with my favorite breakfast tacos in the morning or something like that. Okay, does anybody else have any examples that you could think of? So this breaks it down even more for us. So food deprivation is your unconditioned, right? I'm hungry. That's something innate. It doesn't have to be taught. I don't have to be taught to be hungry. So food deprivation is your unconditioned establishing operation. It's going to be value altering and behavior altering. So your reinforcer, oh, this thing is covering, I can't read it. Is that in the way for you guys too? Okay, well,
click off of it.
I can't click. Oh, there you go. Oh no. Reinforcer establishing effect. So it's an increase in the reinforcing effectiveness of food. So food has become more valuable to me because I am so hungry. I have deprived myself of food. And so now food has increased in value. And then behavior altering is going to increase the current frequency of all behaviors that have been reinforced by food. So all the behaviors that I engage in to try to get access to food, those are also going to increase. So going to a restaurant, maybe cooking, all of those behaviors at that moment have been increased. Food deprivation is your unconditioned motivating operation. And then it's getting paired with a restaurant, which is the neutral stimulus. So that's going to be our learned history. So that now we're going back to basics and we're using our stimulus pairing, right? So food deprivation is being paired with the restaurant. The restaurant is now become the conditioned establishing operation. So your restaurant is now your EO. So now that restaurant is going to have value altering and behavior altering effects. The value altering is going to be reinforcer establishing effect, an increase in the reinforcing effectiveness of food. And then for behavior altering, an increase in the current frequency of all behaviors that have been reinforced by food. Anybody have any questions? I know this is like really important stuff because it has so much more than just the motivating operations, because it's teaching you the process of conditioning, right? So it went from from an unconditioned to conditioned. And so all of that process has to be really ingrained in your mind in order for you to understand the questions in the exam. So does anybody have any questions or want to try to give an example of something that has been established as a surrogate? So a conditioned motivating operation surrogate.
Yeah, I used to, when I put on weight, then I think of exercising. So it gets to a point when I feel that I'm putting on enough weight, then the next thing that comes to mind is exercise. Get my skipping, get my jumpsuit and start run or skip or something. just to lose weight.
Okay. So she's pairing, maybe her pants are getting too tight. And so
Yes.
she's like, uh-oh, I have to exercise. Let's see, what is the surrogate though? The jump rope, or would that be your tool?
Yeah, that would be my tool, the jump rope.
Okay, so that would be a CMO-T. I don't,
A surrogate, I always think of someone carrying another person's baby.
oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the CMO-T, the wine opener.
Oh yeah. I'm
I
trying
would-
to see if I have any better examples. But it's okay. I guess we could keep going and then I'll find. It says I have really good notes, and so I always like to come over here and look at all my weird examples that I have made. Okay. Well, we'll keep going and then we'll go back and find some more examples. Okay, they keep talking about CMO-S appears to play a role in the development of behaviors that do not seem to make much sense, such as seeing a restaurant after dinner and wanting to eat again, or feeling the urge to urinate after seeing the sign for the restroom. Okay, so we need something like the sign is the surrogate, the restaurant is the surrogate. So something that has been paired. Okay, what about my Starbucks example that I always use? So Selena's not a morning person, so let's say like I'm deprived of energy. So that's my unconditioned motivating operation, right? So deprived of energy. So now value altering is coffee or Red Bull is it going to increase its effectiveness. Behavior altering is going to be any of those behaviors that I use to get access to coffee or Red Bull. So like going to Kroger, brewing myself a cup of coffee, going to Starbucks to get a coffee. All of those behaviors are going to increase as well. But let's just say Starbucks, okay? So Starbucks, I see a Starbucks, and so now the Starbucks is going to become my CMO-S. So that's the surrogate, the provider of the coffee. So that's the one holding my baby. The Starbucks is the one holding the reinforcer. So it's going to be value altering. It's going to increase the value of coffee. And then it's also going to increase the behavior of me going into the store to get the coffee. Would that be a good example? Okay, so let's think about reflexive. Any stimulus that systematically precedes the onset of painful stimulation becomes a CMO-R. In its own offset, functions as a reinforcer, and its occurrence evokes any behavior that has produced such reinforcement in the past. For example, in a traditional discriminated avoidance procedure, after some interval of time, the onset of an initially neutral stimulus is followed by the onset of pain stimulation, usually electric shock. Some arbitrary responses, one that is not part of the organism's phylogenic repertoire, such as lever pressing, terminates the painful stimulation. The animal escapes the pain and restarts the interval. If the same response occurs during the warning stimulus, it terminates that stimulus and the shock does not occur on that trial. The response at this phase of the procedure is said to have avoided the pain and is called an avoidance response. Many organisms learn to respond during the onset of a warning stimulus and thus receive very few shocks. Okay. So what is an aversive stimulus? Aversive stimulus, I've never had anybody define it for me, so that's cool. A stimulus may be called aversive because its contingent removal functions as reinforcement. So it's something unwanted, right? I don't like this, and so whenever you take it away, that's the reinforcer, is the escape from that unwanted stimulus. So because its contingent presentation functions as punishment, because it evokes behavior that in the past has terminated it as an MO, or because it has evocative effects with respect to certain smooth muscle and glandular responses, heart rate increases, adrenal secretion. Thus, aversive stimulus does not imply a specific functional relation. It is simply a behavioral translation of common sense expression for unpleasant feeling. Okay, so aversive is just something unpleasant, and the CMO-R is our, just think about your reflex or your response to something unwanted. So that is the way I always remembered CMO-R, is that I'm running away from something. So you can think about, have you guys seen those dog collars that you could put on that you can also put like a imaginary fence around your house, and like the dog is not allowed to go past certain points because it has that collar on. And so what I think happens is that if it goes past the point, it gets like a little shock. But let's just say that before it gets to that point, the dog starts to hear a beep, 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 and he's like, oh no. And so he goes back the other way. So that would be his CMO-R. So he's trying to avoid that shock response because he has a learned history where maybe in the beginning when he first got that collar, he tried multiple times to run past the fence, but now he knows exactly where his boundary is. And so he's not going to go past that anymore because he wants to avoid that unpleasant response. So just think about escape. Okay, so establishing its own offset as an effective punisher, abating any behavior that has been punished. For example, positive evaluation from an employer may have been followed by a promotion or some sort of momentary bonus. This history would establish the offset of positive evaluation as a form of punishment. Wait, why is it punishment? And likely reduce the frequency of all behaviors that have resulted in bad evaluation. Being late, although this relation is quite plausible, little research has seemed to focus on this type of CMO-R. I saw a question on one of the ABA things, and it was like, can CMO-R be a response to something pleasant? And I guess here it's telling you that it can be, but not to focus so much on that. little research has seemed to focus on this type of CMO-R. So don't get your head caught up in that and just think about the warning to stay away from something. This example, it's also serving as a warning to stay away from bad behavior, because in the past when you got a good evaluation, you got a raise. And so now that is serving as a warning to stay away from bad behavior. And so people get caught up in that. And so then they start to confuse themselves. So just don't really worry too much about that, because that's just going to make your brain explode. But just so that you guys understand, like, how I guess a positive can also function as punishment for a different behavior, which would be like the response of being late, not performing at the standards that you should, because you're trying to avoid not getting a raise. But I don't know if that's gonna make your brain explode, so don't think about it too hard. Okay. And then let's go into our last one. Transitive CMO. So an environmental variable establishes the effectiveness of another event as a reinforcer or punisher. It is referred to as CMO-T. This type of MO was previously described in behavior analytic lecture as an establishing stimulus or blocked response CEO. Conditioned reinforcers are dependent upon variable functioning as a CMO-T. Thus, all variables that function as UMOs also function as CMO-Ts, or the stimuli that are conditioned reinforcers, because of their relation to the relevant unconditioned reinforcer. So an example here, not only is food deprivation a UMO that momentarily establishes the value of food as an unconditioned reinforcer, B, evokes all behaviors that have produced food in the past. Food deprivation is also a CMO-T that momentarily establishes the value of all conditioned reinforcers paired with food. An attentive server at a restaurant, a menu, utensils, evoke all behaviors that have produced these conditioned reinforcers in the past. So think about the CMO-T as the tools or the people or the things that have helped you gain access to whatever the MO is. So in this situation, it's food, because you've deprived yourself of food. And so now your server is a tool that's going to get you access to the food. The menu, you have to read it and all that and to get access to food. Utensil, that's a big one. So if they put your plate down, and oh my gosh, I hate when this happens. When they like put your plate down and you're starving, but nobody ever gave you any silverware. So you have to sit there while your food gets cold until somebody comes by and you're like, can I get some silverware, please? But your utensil would be a big time CMO-T in that moment. So those utensils are really valuable to me in that moment because I'm so hungry. But maybe later on in the day when I'm not hungry, it's no longer going to be a CMO-T. So it all depends on what your UMO was. So I was deprived of food, and so then CMO-T, the tool, became more valuable because I was so hungry. The evocative effect of CMO-T is not easily confused with the evocative effect of an SD. If one can see food deprivation as an MO rather than an SD with respect to the behavior that has been reinforced with food, then it functions as an MO rather than an SD with respect to behavior that has been reinforced with the various food-related conditioned reinforcers is an easy extension. Okay. So let's look at this example. So a food deprived rat pulls a cord that turns on a buzzer. In the presence of the buzzer sound, the rat then presses a lever and receives a food pellet. Food deprivation as a UMO makes food effective as an unconditioned reinforcer, a relation that requires no learning history. Food deprivation as a CMO-T also makes the buzzer sound effective as a conditioned reinforcer, which clearly requires a learning history. Thus, food deprivation is a UMO with respect to reinforcing the effectiveness of food, and a CMO-T with respect to reinforcing effectiveness of the buzzer sound. Conversely, food ingestion is a UMO that abolishes the reinforcing effectiveness of food and the buzzer sound. Okay, anybody have any questions or want to try an example of a CMO-T? Oh, here's a good one with the aspirin example that we all always struggle with. So other UMOs such as painful stimulation. So I have a big time headache. So that's going to be my unconditioned motivating operation, something that's innate or inside of me. I had no control over it. It was this pain in my head. It's establishing the reinforcing value of conditioned reinforcers. So as mentioned above, as a UMO, a headache would establish its own removal as a unconditioned reinforcer. However, as a CMO-T, a headache also establishes the reinforcing value of other stimuli. So aspirin that have served to reduce headaches. So in that example, you have you kind of have both the CMO-R and the CMO-T. So the CMO-T is going to be the aspirin. So my headache has increased the value of aspirin, but it has also that removal or that I am trying to escape behavior is also being increased. If that makes sense. So I can see how people might get confused, but just remember, like, the tool was the aspirin itself. And then me running away from the aspirin, I mean, not the aspirin, the headache, can be your response to that headache. Okay. Okay, here's a good example where they use both of the CMO-R and the CMO-T. So sudden darkness, right? That one is maybe all the lights went out. There's a big storm and the electricity went out. Okay, so sudden darkness is going to be a CMO-R for no more darkness. So I'm trying to escape the darkness, right? So that's my CMO-R. I'm trying to get away from darkness by finding some light. And so it is also serving as a CMO-T to find a flashlight. So it is increasing the effectiveness of a flashlight in that moment. So sudden darkness, look for a flashlight, find a flashlight, turn on flashlight, no more darkness. So this one thing was serving as the MO for different stimuli or responses. So for the stimuli situation, it was the flashlight, which was serving as a tool. And then for the response was for me to want to get out of the darkness. And so we could think about the aspirin example. So here we would put headache, look for aspirin, behavior is going to be increased, right? Aspirin, so your headache is serving as a CMO-T for the tool, which is your aspirin, but it's also serving as a CMO-R for running away from headache. So right here, you would say no more headache. I really like this little diagram. Maybe we can post it in the group and be like, this is what we learned today. But yeah, it'll help you to see how one MO can serve as different motivating operations for different things or different responses. All right. How do I go next? Okay, now relevance of MOs to generality of treatment effects. In the applied area, the reinforcer establishing effective MO seems to be well understood, as clinicians may temporarily withhold edibles, tangibles, and even social attention to make them more effective as reinforcers for behaviors being taught. However, these target behaviors will not occur in the future or novel circumstances, even if while learned and part of the learner's repertoire, unless relevant MOs are in effect. So just making sure that we are programming for generalization. It is possible that generalization and maintenance failures are not the only function of novel generalization stimuli being dissimilar to those present during training, but also due to different MOs. Thus, when programming for generalization, clinicians must do so not only across different stimuli, but also across different MOs. In a summary for newly acquired response to be generalized and maintained, its relevant MO must also be in effect. Okay, so just make sure you're programming for generalization.
Yeah, I was thinking of an example.
Okay.
So let's say you are out, you pack your bag, you anticipated the rain, so you have your umbrella. So as soon as the rain starts, you search in your bag for your umbrella so that you don't get wet. So escaping from wet, you look for your umbrella, which the umbrella becomes your tool, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is your CMO-R and
Yes.
also your CMO-T. So the
Yeah.
CMO-T was the umbrella, right?
Yes.
So the being wet is your motivation for searching for an umbrella. So all behaviors that require you to get access to an umbrella are going to increase. And then the value of the umbrella is also going to increase. And then for your CMO-R, the response of your motivation to get out of the rain is also increased. I'm trying to get dry, so that one is my CMO-R. But yeah, that's good. And I really like that diagram because it helped like even my brain to kind of break it down into how one MO can serve as a value altering for different either behaviors or different stimuli.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I know. I really like that. Okay, I guess we can pause here the recording. So just so everybody knows, we are on 391.
We are almost done.